Hi Year 5, this is your art lesson for this week. So, in our art lessons before Christmas, we were thinking a lot about the Spanish artist Pablo Picasso. We were looking at the way that he changed the way people saw art and created things very different from art that had gone before. He's quite famous for a lot of the portraits that he did. And when he did a portrait of somebody, he wanted to show something more than a photograph would. He didn't just want a photographic representation of the person. He wanted to show some aspects of their personality within the picture. And he also possibly wanted to show side views and front views at the same time and emphasize different parts of the person. So, for your lesson today, you are going to be creating a Pablo Picasso inspired portrait of someone that you know or a self-portrait of you. So his portraits might look really crazy, but they actually did look quite like the people that he wanted to show. So this is a portrait of one of his famous models who was also an artist called Dora Maar. And this is another picture of her, and you can also see a photograph of her here. So although she doesn't actually look like a photograph, you can see that her nose looks quite like her real nose. She's got quite big eyes. She's got eyebrows that are quite strong, and he's recreated that. He's also recreated her hairstyle, although not the hairstyle that you can see in that photo. So he's taken elements of her and he's put them into his portrait. And what's interesting also is that she did a portrait of him, and in the same way she took elements of him and put them into her portrait, but in a cubist style. So you can see his big nose and his big eyes and his bald head like in his photo, but the style is a little bit crazy. So not only was he painting portraits of her, she was doing portraits of him. And in his own self-portraits, you can see, although his work became increasingly more abstract as time went on, there were certain elements of himself that were always included. So he had a big nose and big eyes. In this one, he's emphasised the nose and the eyes even more and made them more cubist. And then in the last one, which he did when he was in his 80s, he's still got the big eyes and the big nose, but this is a very different portrait. So in your portrait, you can do almost anything. That's the good thing about Picasso. There's no right or wrong. You can just create something that's just you. So for my example, I'm going to have a go at drawing a Picasso-style portrait of my husband, because he's the only person that I can see around here right now. But you can choose for your portrait to do a self-portrait, or you could draw somebody that's in your family, or if you're doing this in school, you could draw somebody in your classroom. So you will be doing some elements of the person that are like them, but at the same time making it look more like Picasso would. So I'm going to do this picture of my husband here. So he's got quite a long, thin face. So I'm using a black felt tip pen, but you can use whatever you've got handy. Pencil's fine. If you use a Sharpie, make sure you put something underneath your paper so that your Sharpie doesn't go through and damage it. Then I'm going to look next at his hair, which is quite short and a little bit spiky. And it sort of comes down here to his ears like that. And now I'm going to make it look a bit more like Picasso would. So I'm going to draw a side view of his face as well as a front view. He's got quite a big nose like Picasso. And then in the side view, the lips are a bit like a V. And then you would go in and do that. At the side of his nose, he's got some dents, and he's also wearing glasses, and I think I can definitely use them to make my portrait look more like him, but also more interesting. So I can take the shape of his glasses and put that in. And then I think I'm going to put a front-facing eye on this side and a side-facing eye on this side, just to make it look even more confusing. I'm going to start with the centre of the eye. Now, Picasso did use quite interesting ideas for his faces and his facial features, and I will try and put this worksheet into your class dojo so that you can refer to it, but it's here on the video and you can always pause it and have another look at it if you want some more ideas. So he often did eyes with quite big overhangs like this and defined eyebrows. Then on the other side of the face, I'm going to do a side-facing eye, which will be like this. Maybe with some eyelashes. And the glasses again. But I don't want them to match up and be even. I want them to look a bit out of sync. Then I'm going to put an ear on this side, sort of where an ear would be. But on this side, I'm going to put it even higher. So, I like the t-shirt that he's wearing. I think that looks quite interesting. So I want to incorporate that into my picture. So I'm going to do 2 lines for the neck and the shoulder. And I'm just going to put you on fast forward while I do these bits a bit quicker. So on the photograph, there's lots of leaves behind him. So that's a really good way to bring something that's a bit strange into my picture. So I'm going to do that. But on your picture, you might want to put some wallpaper behind, or a window and what you can see out of the window, or maybe a picture that's on the wall behind. You can decide. So these look, I'm really happy with this. I think that looks quite good. But I just want to add a few more lines in, because Mr. Palmer isn't that young anymore. So he has some lines on his face, got like a dimple in his chin, some lines on this side. And then I'm going to start to think about adding colour. So you can use whatever you have at home to add colour. If you've got paints, you can use paints. If you've got colour pencils, that's great. If you've got felt pens, that's great. So just use whatever you've got. But remember, Picasso didn't necessarily use the colours that people's faces were. So he sometimes used quite strange colours, like in this one. And in this one, he's got a blue face with a pattern in. He also used lots of patterns in his work. So that's something you can think about doing as well. So I'm going to start to add colour to this, but I'm going to do it on fast forward so that you don't have to spend ages watching me. So I've been adding colour to my portrait and it makes it look much more interesting. I just want to show you a few little tips. So I did this side in blue, but if I go over it in a different blue, in a different direction, I can add more depth of colour. Or I could even go over it in a completely different colour. I'll show you up here. So if I go over it in purple, it's just a way of just making your colouring a little bit more interesting. The other thing you can do is you can put patterns and lines on top of the colouring that you've done. So behind Mr. Palmer, I've put all these leaves because they were there. But I don't want to make them look realistic. I've done the shape of the leaves. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to add any more colour to the background. But if I wanted to, I could. This post that's behind him, I've sort of like suggested that here. And again, I can go over the colour with another colour. Right, well, I hope that you enjoy making your Picasso style portraits, and when you've done them, please upload them into your portfolio and then I can have a look at them. And remember, you are thinking about creating a portrait that's inspired by Picasso, so you might not have the nose in the right place or the eyes in the right place or things the right colour, but it needs to include some aspect of the person that you're drawing, whether it's a self-portrait or portrait of somebody at school or somebody in your household, where they're a little bit recognisable. Maybe it's just a jumper colour that they're wearing or the shape of their hair that might be the recognisable bit, but just try and include something recognisable in it. I hope you have fun making your portraits, and I'm really looking forward to seeing them when you upload them.